Assalamualaikum and good day to each and everyone. By the way, I am Ahsan Bungarus and I will be discussing the revenue generation of local government and citizens' participation in tax analysis, reforms, and collections. So, before that, let's just first define what is a revenue. So, accordingly, it is defined as the value of all sales of goods and services recognized by a company in a period. It is also referred to as sales or income, forms the beginning of a company's income statement and is often considered the top line of a business. Expenses are deducted from a company's revenue to arrive at its profit or net income. So, additionally, revenue is the income generated from normal business operation and usually includes discounts and deductions for returned merchandise. It is the top line or gross income um, figure from which costs are subtracted to determine the net income. So let's proceed to the revenue formula. So as you can see, revenue formula may be simple or complicated depending on the business. For product sales, for instance, as you can see in the first formula, it is calculated by taking the average price of products sold and multiplying it by the number of products sold. And for the service companies, uh, which is the second formula, it is calculated by taking the average price of services multiplied by the total number of customers. And then these formulas can be significantly expanded to include more detail. For example, many companies will model their revenue forecast all the way down to the individual product level or individual customer level. Now, let us discuss the LGU's revenue generation program. So accordingly, the taxing power of the LGUs is recognized under the 1986 Constitution of the Republic of the Philippines. It provides under Section 5, Article 10 thereof that each local government has the power to create its own sources of revenues and the levy taxes, fees, and charges subject to further guidelines and limitations as the Congress may provide, consistent with the basic policy of local autonomy. Such taxes, fees, and charges shall accrue exclusively to the local government. In addition, the power to tax was further reiterated under the Local Government Code of 1991. The local taxes are imposed through the issuance of local tax ordinances. So, pursuant to Section 4 of Executive Order Number 127 issued on January 30, 1987, the revenue operation of the LGUs is under the supervision of the Department of Finance or the DOF. In addition, the DOF shall be assisted by the Bureau of Local Government Finance or the BLGF in the formulation and implementation of policies on local government revenue administration and fund management. In addition, the BLGF or the Bureau of Local Government Finance shall likewise exercise technical supervision over the assessment operations of all local governments. So here is the key offices wherein the revenue generation and function of LGUs is carried out primarily by the Assessor's Office, BPLO or the Business Permits and License Office, and Treasurer's Office. So in local Assessor's Office, um, it is stated that they are the one in charge of the discovery, classification, appraisal, assessment, and evaluation of real properties within the LGU's territorial jurisdiction, which shall be used as the basis for taxation. So take note of the words within the territorial jurisdiction. So every LGU is responsible for the areas under their jurisdiction. And then another one is the BPLO, or the Business Permits and License Office, wherein they are the one in charge for assessing taxes, fees, and charges, and issuing business permits and licenses for the businesses of the businessmen or businesswomen. So let's proceed to the governing laws, rules, and regulations, wherein the revenue generation power of the LGUs is primarily governed by the following laws and regulations. So in Local Government Code of 1991, it provides, among others, the LGU's power to create sources of revenue and the fundamental principles governing the exercise of such power. And Local Government Code of 1991, there are some of the sections involved, which are the section 130, which is the fundamental principles governing the exercise of the taxing and other revenue-raising powers of the LGUs. And section 134 and 152, scope of the LGU's taxing powers. And section 191, LGU's authority to adjust rates of tax ordinances. And section 198, fundamental principles in the appraisal, assessment, levy, and collection of real property tax. And section 212 is the preparation of SFMV. And section 217 and 218, which is the basis of computation for assessment of real properties. And section 219, general revision of assessment and property classification. And section 236 and 237, ideal land tax. And section 246 and 260, collection of real property tax. So for further elaboration, you may check the Local Government Code of 1991 to elaborate the given or the involved sections in the said rules and regulation. So in LGU's revenue code or tax ordinances, it includes the compilation of the respective LGU's current revenue regulations. And local assessment manual, it provides a uniform system of real property appraisal and assessment for taxation purposes. Now, let's see a sample of process flow issuing of mayor's permit and collection of fees and business tax on new business. So here is, as you can see, here is the process of issuing mayor's permit to the taxpayer. So it involves the taxpayer, the BPLO or the Business Permits and License Office, and City Treasurer's Office or the CTO. So first thing to do is the taxpayer will submit the requirements for application. The taxpayer will submit his or her requirements to the BPLO in order for the BPLO to give the taxpayer a application form. And then after that, the taxpayer will submit the accomplishment forms or the application forms back to the BPLO to include the information on the application and generate mayor's permit form. And then the taxpayer will receive the mayor's permit form and submit the copy to the inspection division. So the inspection division will be found in the city treasurer's city treasurer's office or the CTO, and then the CTO is responsible to conduct inspection, evaluate submitted documents by the taxpayer, and then they will be prepared report and issues tax declaration sheets. And then the taxpayer will receive the tax declaration sheets and present it again to CTO, and then after that the CTO will issue tax bill based on the initial capital on the business establishment of the taxpayer, and then the taxpayer will pay the tax, and then uh, the CTO is responsible to receive payments and issue official receipt, and the taxpayer will receive the official receipt, and then uh, will will give it, or will submit a photocopy to BPLO, uh, and then the BPLO is responsible to issue mayor's permit copy and plate, and then lastly the taxpayer will receive a mayor's permit copy and plate, and that's the process of issuing a mayor's permit for the new business. And then we'll proceed to the uh, process flow of renewal of mayor's permit and collection of fees and business permit. So now we will be discussing the how to renew a mayor's permit for a business. Then the first thing to do is the taxpayer will submit the requirements for renewal. So there are set requirements for renewal, and then we'll give it to CTO or the city treasurer's office, and the CTO is responsible again to evaluate documents including payments of previous taxes. Uh, they are the one who will evaluate, or who will check if the taxpayer uh, is already done with the previous taxes on his or her business. And then they are also responsible for to compute tax due and prints tax bill, and then the taxpayer will receive tax bill and proceeds to cashier, and then uh, the CTO will receive payments and issues again official receipt, and the taxpayer will receive it, and then the taxpayer again will submit photocopy of official receipt to BPLO, or the uh, business permits and license office, and then the CTO will issue mayor's permit copy and sticker, and will give it to the taxpayer, and that's all. That's the process of uh, for renewal. And it take note that if you notice, in issuing mayor's permit, it involves the taxpayer, the BPLO, and the CTO, and for renewal it only involves the taxpayer and the CTO. That's the difference. So here are some of the improving revenue generation capabilities of LGU. First is the honest and effective governance, truly transparent, disciplined, and serving the interest of the country and its people. So according to uh, Commission on Audit, the Department of Budget and Management, and the Department of Finance, or DOF, it is one of the vision of the Philippine government for the Philippine public financial management system on 2011. Then the second one is the public finance agencies of the Philippine government are collectively committed to promote fiscal responsibility and good governance through transparency and accountability in financial transactions in the Philippine government. That's according to COA, DBM, and DOF. And then LGU growth lagging behind an inflation. For the past decade, the growth of LGU revenues have failed to catch up with the combined growth of population as well as prices. And then we also have continued high dependence on the internal revenue allotment or ERA. Accordingly, dependence on the internal revenue allotment and other grants at all levels of LGUs remained high at 75% for provinces, 79% for municipalities, and 42% for cities. And another is the local revenue sources negatively affected elections. Accordingly, LGU local governing sources, especially local taxes collections, are negatively affected by a 3-year election-related cycle. For the different LGU levels, elected-related cyclical behaviors in different local revenue sources have been observed. And in provinces, real property tax, business tax, fees and charges, and economic enterprises. In cities, economic enterprises, other receipts. In municipalities, the real property tax, business tax, fees and charges, and economic enterprises, and other receipts. Another is the delay in updating the schedule of market values or SMB, and accordingly, the inability of most LGUs to regularly enact updated schedules of market values is an indicative of considerable delay problems. 10 to 20 years as associated with the politicalization of the LGU SMV updating process. Another one is the problematic real property accounts collection efficiencies as of 2011 are still now primarily because of problematic real property accounts. And another is means through the national government support the delivery official public services. It is used to equalize or lessen disparities in fiscal capacities among LGUs. In addition, more allotments can be given to LGUs with greater needs and less resources. Allotments can also influence the activities of LGUs. More allotments can be given to help themselves by collecting taxes efficiently. And lastly, the LGU's role in stimulating progress is a provider of economic infrastructure, enabler, the creator of business-friendly environment for sustainable development, and planner as a planner and a promoter of inbound investments. Bringing in investments creates more jobs, increases productivity, generates resources for the government, and leads to improving the quality of life in the communities. Let us now proceed to tax reforms in recent Philippine history. So accordingly, taxes are defined or are funds used by the government to finance basic social services that are vital to the lives of citizens and economic growth of Philippines. Uh, every year, individuals and corporations pay individual taxes which are used to fund expenditures. Because when a government spending exceeds a revenue collected, a budget deficit occurs. Additionally, the government borrows money to cover this gap. And then, moreover, the loans are later on added as additional expenses for the country. According to the National Tax Research Center, taxes collected have not been enough to cover total government expenditures since 1998 as according to Rappler.com. And then let's proceed to who are responsible to pay taxes. So, accordingly, the Tax Reform Act of 1997 says that the following have the duty to pay taxes in the country. First is the citizens. So, what is this citizen? A citizen of the Philippines residing in the country is taxable on all income derived from sources within and outside the Philippines. So those Philippines who are residing in the country are responsible to pay their taxes. And then the non-resident residents, a non-resident citizen is taxed on income derived from source within the Philippines. So for example, if you are not a resident of this country, um, and then you have a source of income, or you have a business, or business within the Philippines, you are entitled to pay the taxes derived from the sources within the Philippines. And then the overseas contract workers is a citizen who is working and deriving income from abroad. As an overseas contract worker is taxed only on income derived from the Philippines. So on overseas contract worker, they are only entitled to pay their taxes to those income derived from the Philippines. And for alien individuals, is a resident and non-resident alien individuals are taxed only on income derived from sources in the Philippines. And then the domestic corporation, when you say domestic corporation, those corporation located in the Philippines is taxable on all income derived from sources within and outside the Philippines. And then the foreign corporation, um, whether or not engaged in trade or business in the Philippines, a foreign corporation is taxable only on income derived from sources within the Philippines. Aside from that, tax reform has been rationalized in the past as a basis of achieving the economic and political motives of policymakers and legislatures, be they to enhance the equity, efficiency, and simplicity of the tax system. For example, to reduce tax burdens for or encourage desirable or discourage undesirable behavior on the part of taxpayers, or to induce investment and positive spillovers from corporations, where political and economic motives might also coincide, is the use of tax policy to support industrial policy. In addition, the Philippines has had a dominantly tax preference-based industrial policy since 1960s, with increasingly generous tax preferences. Additionally, the roots of the present system of taxation can be found in the system formulated under the revolutionary government of President Corazon Aquino, whose term ran from 1986 to 1992. And to understand the basis for tax reform during that era, one must take stock of the circumstances that existed before she rose to power, the troubled latter years of the regime of Ferdinand Marcos. And let's proceed to lesson learned from tax reform programs in the Philippines. Tax reforms in Philippines have always been exercising colored by both the politics and the economics of the time period. While economics has usually provided the rationale for reform, politics has often shaped the outcomes. Unfortunately, a review of present experiences with tax reforms suggests that incoming administrations often cannot rely on previous tax reforms in order to finance new programs. In addition, tax, tax reforms have generally not generated sufficiently persistent increases in revenues over time for various reasons. Um, Aside from that, these sections identifies the lesson drawn from tax reform experience in the Philippines. So, accordingly, based on its ability to achieve some or many of the goals of a good tax system, it would appear that the most major successful tax reform in recent Philippine history has been the 1986 tax reform program. In addition, the 1997 comprehensive tax reform program fell short of generating sufficient revenues over time and failed to rationalize tax incentives. Other reforms had a relatively lesser and varying degrees of success. Moreover, this includes the opportunities to update existing taxes such as broadening on the value-added tax in 2005 and indexation of sin taxes in 2012. So that's the end of my discussion, my report. So, but before that, I want you to remember these lines coming from Richard M. Nixon. It said that make sure you pay your taxes, otherwise you can get in a lot of trouble. So that's all. Thank you for listening. God bless.